Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Each week, we hear real-time stories from athletes and CEOs on how to maximize performance through an endurance mindset. Let's get started. Well, welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. I am extremely excited for our guest today. He is a successful and impressive leader with almost 30 years of experience. He's committed to building something bigger than himself and leaving a legacy. Serial entrepreneur who's founded multiple businesses in the fitness space. He is a partner at FSQ Sport and FSQ Consulting. Please welcome Matt Young. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. And as you know, we love talking about endurance. And so, Matt, my question for you, tell me how your endurance mindset has impacted your life unexpectedly.
Well, I would say it was all to do with sports and how to create an environment where we can engage as many as possible, as long as possible, in the best environment possible. So coming from a small town where sport was really the teacher for all the things that we now know are called transformation and transformative, it taught me character, it taught me connection, it taught me confidence, and obviously the technical tactical aspects of it, but it was way more than just the physical and technical tactical. It was all the other things. And to be able to, graduate in kinesiology and get into the personal training business first, and then get into the sport business second, has just enabled me to really share that passion and love for making it better and making it better for people. How do we create better experiences for people that are entering in sport? How do we do a better job at retention? And how do we really start to grow the game when there are all these other distractions and options and technology and all these other things that are impacting adversely our ability to do the things that we had the passion and fortunate to have in sport?
I love it. To take us to that moment when this light bulb turned on for you, that this is your passion, this is what you wanted to do and create for the rest of us here in the industry.
Yeah, I think for me, it was more therapy. I came from a very dysfunctional family in upbringing. So when I do say sport taught me those characteristics, that was the teacher that I didn't have naturally in my household, unfortunately. And I was very fortunate to have a coach who really believed in me when I didn't have that belief in myself. He kept putting me in situations. It was okay. He made it okay for me to fail. He made it okay for me to struggle. And he also made it okay for me to succeed. And I really saw that as an example. This person really cares about me, and they care about my individual as well as other individuals' personal trajectory and growth. It was more than just the wins and losses. This was a dress rehearsal for life. And that was the light bulb moment for me. And I will tell you how it happened is that I was doing some not productive things. And because we're in a small town, of course, everyone hears about it, knows about it. So the next day in gym class, he brought me up to the front of the class. And I think maybe 30, 35 people. And he put his arm around me and I was all proud. And I thought I was going to get accolades. And he said, how many of you, and he was talking to the other students in the class, would love to go on after high school and have a post-secondary education in sports? And everyone, of course, put up their hand. And how many of you wish you had the opportunity? And everyone put up their hand. And how many of you can actually do that? And not very many people put up their hand. And he goes, well, this guy can. And I was all getting real primed for what's to come. And he goes, but he's making some bonehead decisions and he's pissing away his opportunity. And it's such a sad thing because he's following what he thinks is the cool crowd. And I want you all to look at him and watch this because it's going to be a great lesson for you in life about staying on your own path versus following other people's paths. And my first, obviously, response was anger. And I was mad. And then he just walked out and I was just standing there in front of everybody looking at me. And then I said, okay, that was a challenge. He challenged me. That was adversity. And, no authentic victory comes without some adversity, and no adversity comes without an authentic, real challenge. And so for some reason at that age, or I don't know what it was, I wish I could lie to you, but I don't know what it was. It just resonated with whether I respected him or whether I felt I was letting him down. And I said, okay, you know what? You're right. I get it. And okay, I need to make some changes. So that was really the light bulb moment for me on, let's not waste this opportunity. Let's not waste these tools. And I wanted to become that for as many other people after I saw it follow through. It was such a positive experience for me that even in our 20 years of business, our motto was challenge, adversity, victory in our personal training setting. So I would say that would be the light bulb moment.
That's a great story. And what courage it must have taken him to do that, right? To pull you up in front of the class, to make an example. I suspect you've had conversations with him about that moment subsequently. But talk to us about that. Like what do you guys talk about when you revisit that situation, that moment, and why he chose to do that right then?
Yeah, it's funny because I keep in touch with him every year. So you're right. It's something that I really cherish and appreciate. And I let him know. And I let him know in terms of this is what we've gone on and done. And this was in part started by you. So that small pebble in the ocean has had a great ripple effect, so to speak. You couldn't do it today. I mean, parents would be marching down in the school today. Teacher would be fired. How dare you? Embarrassed, etc. But it was coming at a time, I mean, I'm old, obviously. It's coming at a time where people cared and they could hold you accountable. And, if you did something in poor taste or poor form at school, you'd get in trouble at school and then you go home and get in trouble at home. And now you get in trouble at school and then someone from home goes into school and says, how dare you, my kid trouble. So a little bit of a different time, but I really think that's important. I really think that we need people like that in our lives. I think that we need the tough love, the direct feedback, whatever adjective that you want to use to describe that. And I think it's important. It's an essential part of our growth. So yeah, it was big. For him, it wasn't courageous because he just did that with everybody. We all looked up to him. He was that mentor and that guiding, he was the person that said, if you're not acting like a knucklehead, you're acting like a knucklehead. So I think that was important, not just for me, but for a lot of people that were coming through at that time. So we just try to take it and say, okay, how can we replicate that in different settings throughout our career going forward?
So I'm curious, Matt, how have you taken those learnings and then applied them to your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, I think that's a lot to unpack, but entrepreneurial wise, I mean, we built a personal training business that was really focused on all of the other skills. Personal training, when we started, was all about Jenny or Johnny six-pack. And, look at me, arm around the trainer. This is who I'm training with. It didn't really deliver a lot to the consumer. It wasn't consumer-centric. So when we came into the space, we said, to differentiate ourselves, we're going to do a couple things differently. We're going to ask people what they've always wanted to do, but they don't feel like can, or what they've always wanted to do, but they've never prioritized. And then we're going to use the gym space and the relationships as a conduit to achieving those goals, no matter what they are. So people might come in and say, well, I used to run and I really want to get back to that. So we would go through the process of getting them rehabilitated so that they could run. And then we go run with them. So whether it was a 5 kilometer, I'm from Canada, so it's in kilometer, not mile. So it was a 5K, and then we do a 10K. And then they'd say, do you think I could do a marathon? Yeah, sure. But let's do a half marathon first and then a marathon. So we would organize that. And instead of, and you know this better than anyone else, instead of doing it in isolation and loneliness, we would do it as a group together. And the focus wasn't on the time. It was on the journey, the experience, like meeting new people, meeting like-minded people. Oh, you're a 4:30 marathon runner. Well, here's your group and here's your tribe. Oh, you're a 3:30, want to run them faster? Well, here's your group. Well, we're all going to start at staggered times and finish together and have a beer. So, when you get to the races, it wasn't so much pressure because you would run with a group, you'd have familiarity, you felt supported. So that's really how that transitioned from where it started to where it was. And even Ironmans and half Ironmans, we did those. And what was different is when we did our first Ironman races, it was all about the time and beating everyone beside you. And we had a lot of clients that I'm going to say had no business showing up for an Ironman, but went through a very supported training process, group swims, group rides, group runs, brick training sessions. And it was just a totally different take on it, because we encouraged their outcome goal to be to finish and have a great experience through the whole thing. It was the first one. It can be overwhelming, as you know. And, we took that overwhelmingness away by approaching it as a team approach. And surprise, surprise, people did better than what they thought they were going to do, because they were fully supported, and the focus wasn't on the time, because none of us were, going to qualify for Kona or break any age group, records, although some did. It wasn't the focus. And interestingly, when it's not the focus, you can accomplish both. You can have a great journey and experience, and then you can also perform at your best. So I would say that's how it transitioned.
It's interesting that you say that, because I find on race day, I perform my best when I'm not worrying about the outcome, right? I start so many races and I'm halfway through the swim and I'm doing the math and figuring out when am I going to finish this race, and it's 14 hours from now. But if I change my mindset and say, you know what, let's just enjoy this swim and being in this community. And next thing you know, you're coming out of the water at a better split. Your bike splits are faster. Your run's more enjoyable. And all of a sudden, you're at a better position at the end. It's amazing how your mind impacts your outcome. I'm still curious on the entrepreneurial journey, Matt. When you first got started, talk to us about like what that was like. Was it you with a client, and then it turned into 5 clients, and then you found a team, and then talk to us about that build process?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. It was exactly that. So we started with one person, and we just asked ourselves, we had plan Bs in case it didn't work. And, we said, is the industry ready for this? Are people ready for this? It was back when personal training, only the wealthy had a personal trainer, and they really had a personal trainer to say they had a personal trainer. It wasn't really to accomplish anything, which I found weird. I thought, if you're going to pay this amount of money, you must want some result. And those results have got to be more than lose 10 pounds or get a bigger chest or biceps, because those are not sustainable. After you've accomplished that, then you're like, okay, did it. And you go back to what you were doing. So, we started up with one person and said, this is what we're doing. And one turned into 2, turned into 4, turned into 8. And, soon we had to hire a team. We hired all our friends. Every mistake in business that you could make, we did, and learn from that very quickly. And had to pivot. And then we got out into our own space and had our own space, our own group. We called it Innovative Fitness. There was nothing innovative about it whatsoever. You came in, you set a goal, and we worked towards your goal. It was a bit tongue in cheek, and it was kind of the old school. So back to that physical education teacher, it was us being accountable. We didn't want to be, I only did this because of you. No, you did this because of you. So we didn't want to be the crutch for people, and we didn't want to be the reason that people thought they did it. We really wanted to impart the process on them so that they could be better people. Quite frankly, better people, better business people, better parents, better friends, better workers, better coworkers, better managers. And, that's what we did. I'll give you an example of how we wove all that in. So each year we would take 125 people to the Grand Canyon, and we would have a beginner, intermediate, and advanced group. The advanced group would leave first and go all the way to the bottom and back up. Obviously intermediate halfway, and the beginners a quarter of the way. We were all about how can everyone still enjoy it at their level of comfort and their level of fitness. And we would all end at the same time. So we would roughly guesstimate it's going to take 8 hours down and up for the advanced. And so they leave, and then we would all come together. At the bottom, we would have an envelope for them, and it was from their significant other. And they didn't know that we'd gone to their significant other to get this envelope, and we'd hand it to them, and they'd read it in front of 20, 40, 60 people. And it would all, it would be the things that we should tell our significant others, but we don't on a regular basis. So I'm so proud of you for doing this, the changes, keep it up. So, you're in this beautiful scenery, so totally transformational experience. You're physically taxed, you're mentally taxed, you're reading this, you didn't expect it, and you're reading this in front of everybody. And you can imagine some of the some of the experiences and some of the feelings that would come out of that. And then everyone would come back up to the top and celebrate that. So really creating those experiences for people, lay people. They didn't have to be high performers. They didn't have to be number ones. That's what we did. And starting with one and just continuing. And people would say, people aren't interested in that. No, I just want to train. I just want to lift weights. I just want to be bigger. We would say, okay, but maybe we're not for you. We didn't want to be exclusionary, but what we were offering was important. And we really, there's organizations that have a vision and mission and values, and they put them on the wall. And there's organizations that live those vision, mission, and values. And we were the latter.
That really resonated with me on the notes of gratitude. My last race was Ironman in Wisconsin, and I went there by myself. It was the first time I've ever raced that distance without my family or support crew on site. And my wife had gone around and asked our friends to write me notes. And the day before I left, she handed me the envelope. And the day before my race, I was just sat there in my hotel room reading these wonderful notes from all my people. And you could feel the emotion, right? You could probably sense it in my voice. So I love that idea of you getting to the turnaround point in the Grand Canyon, and then you're sharing it amongst the group. You've gone through that grueling halfway mark, and so you're already emotionally sort of ready to explode, and there you get the chance. How did you guys come up with that sort of, that's sort of revolutionary, right? That's, again, back to your point about the experience and the emotion. How did that connect and really manifest itself?
Yeah, I think it was, what mattered to people and listening to people. And, sometimes we would have, especially when you're training for these longer events, it can be quite self-indulgent, right? And a lot of our clients had families, et cetera. So we would really want to do a good job of really understanding why and sharing why are you doing this? What does it mean for you? Beyond, trying to get a sub 10 or sub 11 Ironman finish, and it was, I need to physically challenge myself, because that by physically challenging myself, I am going to challenge myself socially, because then I have to kind of pick and choose what people I want in my life and what people I don't, and prioritize who matters and don't. And, intellectually, I've got to be way more, I'm at work for 11 hours, but I'm getting 7 hours of productivity done. I need to flip that so that I'm at work for 7 hours and getting 11 hours. So it was really about, listen, if we can help you fill in this physical sphere, you can't help but fill in the social, spiritual, intellectual, and emotional spheres. And it doesn't matter which sphere you choose. It's been a transfer across all of it, and it usually does. We just happen to be in the physical space because that's what we knew, and that's what worked for me. And so I wanted to share what worked for me with as many people as possible. So I think it came from the experience. Your question was, how did it manifest itself? It came from living it. It came from understanding people, their motivations, what makes them excited, and really creating that inclusive environment where we're bringing in the significant others. We're bringing in the kids, and we're highlighting that. When people used to come into the gym, we would yell their name like cheers every single time. And, you would see the transition of people through time, without fail. By week 3, week 1, everyone would be like, what the hell's going on here? Why are you yelling my name? I'm trying to get to the bathroom. And we would have every one of our facilities set up so you had to walk in front of the glass to come into the door. So we would see who's coming in next. So you couldn't just sneak in. And then the bathrooms were the furthest across. You had to walk across the floor to get to the bathrooms in every setup. So everyone would say hello, hi, high fives, fist bumps. So you're really creating an environment of positivity and welcomeness. And then people would get changed. It was by appointment only. So there would be 10 clients and 10 trainers. All those clients would go into the change rooms, and then they would have a dialogue, and they would network, and they would, exchange stories, etc. So we really wanted to create that environment, a community around that. And, albeit it was for a very niche socioeconomic demographic that can afford that price point, we had to start somewhere. And that's how it began, and just really tapping into the power of creating that community.
There's such a great lesson there for our audience members who are athletes and coaches. You do have an impact across not just the vertical that you're focusing on with your client or your coach, pillows over to your social, to your family, so those of you who are listening, please take that into mind when you're coaching your clients or you're being coached and think through, like, how is this going to impact the rest of my life, the rest of my goals, my bigger picture? Matt, I'm going to jump back into business. You left me a breadcrumb talking about you made every mistake you can in business. Any favorites? Any favorite story from a business perspective?
Oh yeah. Well, first of all, hiring all our friends. So when we graduated, we thought it would be amazing and people would just be as passionate as we were and as committed and as on time and as excited. And that turned out not to be the case. But that was part of our learning. That was the first issue that we had. The second issue was we made the mistake that a lot of startup businesses make, and that was we went headlong without creating the systems. So we forged ahead doing what came naturally and intuitively to us, and just assumed that everyone else was on the same page or understood what it was that we were doing. And it took kind of until we were expanded really well. We were training one day. The story is I saw one of our new coaches doing something with a client that was so far above where they were. And I had a time to reflect after that. And I pulled them into the office and said, just walk me through kind of what you were thinking there and what went into the selection of exercises that you did with that client. And she turned to me and she said, well, I saw you guys do it. And I thought it was a really cool exercise. And I thought to myself, okay, that's 100% on me. We hadn't set up the systems appropriately to say, for new clients, this is how we establish their baseline, and this is how we prepare them for what's going to happen. I mean, the client that I was working with had been a 4 or 5 year client with a very specific goal. So to have somebody just mirror that, and that was on me. So we had to create systems, and we had to go right back, and that's the toughest thing to do as an entrepreneur. Not many people have the foresight to create systems as they're doing them, documenting them along the way, so that if and when you need to scale, they're already there, and you don't have to be working full time and go back and plug yourself in and recreate all the systems. That's very tough to do. And in our business, it was a personal training business, and we had a rotational trainer system. We did not want the consumer to develop the friendship with the training coach, because once that happened, then you couldn't hold them accountable. You started cutting corners. You weren't doing the same things. We believed that if personal training was going to be a recognizable profession, we needed to be professional. You don't go to a party and sling your arm over your doctor and go, hey, this is my doctor. Like it's just not what you do. So we wanted it to evolve from buying a friend to really having this coaching professional in your life. And so we needed to create systems to do that. And we created a lot. So those are the biggest things: expanding too fast, growing too fast, saying yes when we should have said no, really taking the time to reevaluate. Those were some of the mistakes that we made. And those are common to a lot of startup businesses.
Certainly. So any advice, what advice would you give if we've got an audience member who's thinking about starting a business or entering a business in the fitness, personal training, endurance space? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, well, so my first question to them would be, is this you equity, or do you want to scale it bigger? Because those are your two choices. I mean, we're in a day and age where everyone is being told to be their own boss, and they can. And that's not true. There are some people that are well suited to being their own boss, and there are some people who are very well suited to working in a team with other people. And you really have to figure out who you are and what you want to be. It's not one is better than the other. They're just both two different things. So that's the first piece of advice I would give is, do you want to be part of a bigger team, or do you want to scale your business, or do you want it just to be all about you? Because if you go down the road of it being all about you, it's going to be really hard to transition your relationships off to somebody else. The only time you make money is when you're working. When you're going on vacation, you're not making money. When you're sick, you're not making money. When you're injured, you're not making money. Yes, we've got the digital aspect, so you could probably do that. But I mean, if you're in a coaching setting, there is no more effective coaching setting than a one-on-one and that relationship. So that's number one. Number two is the parameters around the relationship. It's got to, do you want to be a friend or do you want to be professional? And people always challenge me on this. Well, come on, it's personal training. It is a friendship. And I'm okay with it being a relationship, but it needs to be a professional relationship. There needs to be boundaries, because if there's not boundaries, it can become taxing on both the entrepreneur and the consumer and confusing. I think you need to be clear in, do you want to be the professional? And is this going to be something that you're going to do professionally, or is this going to be a hobby? Is this going to be your hobby and you've got a bunch of people and you're bringing them out for rides and it's friendly and you have beers and then you cross the line with stuff you say or stuff you do, or you don't cross the line? Like, it needs to be one or the other, because going back and forth between those two, and it's really hard to go back to the professional side of it when you brought in the personal side of it.
That's really insightful. Thank you. Rewinding a couple of years back, you were involved in a documentary around the cost of winning, around kids and sports. Can you talk to us about sort of where that passion project is?
Yeah. So we don't have enough time to cover everything, but let's just say that when I got into this, we had kids, and when I arrived on the community sports scene, I saw that it was the same nonsense as the original personal training scene. The youth sports scene was all about the celebrity coach with the celebrity club and the unknowing parent with their future Hall of Famer. And so we really saw what that was doing to the community sport ecosystem, and it wasn't positive. And, sport is really for a lot of people, for let's say 85 to 90% of people that play sport, it's really a dress rehearsal for real life, where you're going to learn things like winning, losing, teammates, camaraderie, friendships, adversity, victory, defeat, failure, feedback in a really controlled setting. So you're going to learn that before you go into the workplace. And really, there's no consequences. You're still going to Dairy Queen when you finish, whether you won or lost. It doesn't really matter. But for some reason, we have really wrapped in parents' identity, socioeconomically, and ego, I guess, into their kids' performance in sport and how they're doing. And we seem to associate what team they're playing on and what division they're in with our status. And I guess it's human nature, but it's really detrimental to what's happening. So one of the things that we did was we said, 6 to 20 points of contact to make the sale. What are we selling? We're selling the notion that development is what matters. Development is simply finishing the season better than you started across a mutually agreed upon set of criterion that pull from technical, tactical, physical, social, emotional, leadership, etc. I guarantee that almost all your listeners in their sport experience, less than 2% of their coaches have ever baselined their kids on any set of skill development at the beginning of the season, let alone reevaluated mid-season, let alone reevaluated at the end of the season. So their metric of success, or what was it, is usually the standings, the score on the schedule. And really that's not any metric of success whatsoever. So we got into the space and said, man, this space needs to be cleaned up. It's too important to just let go. And we developed a documentary. So we went to the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. We asked them what they thought about what was going on. We went to Sport New Zealand. We asked them. We went to Norway. We went to Ohio State University and talked to their coaches. We went to Canada Soccer and talked to their then director of development, youth development. And it was the same thing, at the higher levels of sport, they're concerned how kids are showing up. They're showing up mentally exhausted and beaten, and they're showing up physically exhausted and injured and burned out and ACL injuries, etc. We're specializing way too early in a lot of sports. It's been proven time and time again that some of the best athletes are people that played multiple sports during their childhood. It just stands to reason that if you're going to turn sport into a job starting at 6 and 7, then eventually kids are going to start hating their job. And so we now have a 70% attrition rate at 13. Some argue that that's even lower because kids are just tapping out. It's not, youth sport is not providing the same value that it used to provide. And youth sport, if you recall, was intended to get people ready for war and combat and get them healthy way back in the day. That's why youth sport was created in these leagues, and you'd learn all these things. So much more of it was for the social emotional development and leadership than it was for the technical tactical. Now we've just found a way to capitalize on it, of course, with the 6-year-old national championship for T-ball at Disneyland. So the documentary was really just to say, listen, you think that this is what you need to do to get to these high performance pathways? Here are the people at the high performance pathways telling you it's not necessarily the best path. For a small percent, yes, it will be, but those people and prodigies will identify themselves. The LeBron James, the Kobe Bryants, the Christine Sinclairs in soccer, they will identify themselves. And the best thing we can do is probably get out of their way. Yeah, that's what the documentary was all about.
Fantastic. And we'll include a link to that documentary in our show notes. What are you doing? What are you working on these days?
Well, we're working on how we operationalize and professionalize the leadership in youth sport. So if you have a community association, it's usually run by somebody who's really well-intentioned, wants to get involved, but there is nowhere, not FIFA, not USOPC, not the International Olympic Committee, no one's created an operating system for sport, the delivery. So how do I run an AGM? How do I set up a season up for success from the board level, from an executive director level, from a technical director levels, from the players and parents level? How do we get all these stakeholders together, rowing in the same direction to create a really positive experience for the participants, whether they're there for participation or whether they're there for high performance? So we've spent a lot of time based on demands, creating tools, services, and resources to fill those gaps. So someone comes to us and says, listen, we need something between who's got the strongest heartbeat and taking $3,000 for your A license in coaching. There's nothing in between that. So can you create some coach development resources that are around the 5 C's, confidence, character, connection, competence, and confidence? How do we roll that out? So we create tools and resources around that. And it's slow because it's really tough telling people that are giving their free time, mostly volunteers, that they're not that good at their job. And we're not doing it to criticize them. We're trying to do it to help them. So the exceptions understand that and they want to go get help. The norm is, why are you telling me what I'm doing? I'm just doing my best. Beat it. So it's tough because at the end of the day, what we care about is the experience for the athletes. Again, as many as possible, as long as possible, in the best environments possible.
So it sounds like you're working directly with organizations that are creating sports, creating events. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, so we work with anybody from a local club that may have 250 participants all the way up to the PGA of America. We help them develop their new player development pathway. Tennis Canada just unveiled their whole player development pathway. So we don't discern. It's whoever's ready to make change and can get value out of the tools that we've created and provide to them.
And I suspect schools and universities would be another opportunity.
You would suspect that, but in Canada, so first of all, everyone's already doing everything right. Like that's the main challenge in sport is that you've got a lot of healthy egos. You've got a lot of former players that are now in positions of coaches and managers. And because I was a good player, it means I'm going to be a good coach and good manager and good board member. That doesn't necessarily translate across. They are a different set of skills. But helping those people understand that there are other people that can help them and might have blind spots, that's again a leadership thing. And that's humility, that's asking for help, that's being vulnerable, and that's something that former athletes don't do very well. So yeah, it's interesting.
So moving towards the future and talking about artificial intelligence, how do you see AI weaving its way in and out of the industry?
Great question. So I think, we're seeing technology, not just AI. We've got a choice. We can either say community sport, physical activity, physical literacy, and participation is a foundational aspect of human life. We were born to move. We were born to socialize. We were born to be active. We can either make the decision that we need to invest in that, and it's not sexy. It takes a long time. It's not instant gratification. Or we can do what we're starting to do is we can e-game and get into the e-sports, and we can just start capitalizing on some of the naivety of the players and parents, and we can do sports betting, and that'll keep people attracted to sports. But ultimately, what's going to happen is as the participation at the bottom of this triangle keeps shrinking, then so too does the high performers pool. And as savvy organizations realize that, I mean, Adam Silver just came out with a whole, his concerns on the NBA and the development in the United States compared to the development in Europe. It's just a totally different development process. And again, I won't say right or wrong, but the results speak for themselves. United States should be cleaning up just based on their population size in every single Olympics that ever happens by a long shot, just by the fact there's 350 million people. But, how does Norway punch so far above their weight? That's culture. So AI was what you specifically asked about. I think that in terms of getting information and getting the necessary tools and showing parents and players what they should expect and be getting from their sport experience, may be easier to get to them now, because you can bypass a bunch of gatekeepers, or you can create all the material and do the job of the gatekeepers and make them extinct. So, where every organization has a technical director, now you could use AI to say, here's the letter to the parents, here's the letter to the coaches, here's the letter to the players. We're all on the same thing, and punch, hit send, and it all goes out. I just don't think anything is going to replace the feeling that you get when you have an experience of finishing an Ironman, or, running across the finish line of a 5K race, or, winning a little league game in your community, with your peers. I don't think anything is going to replicate that. I get that. I'm not trying to hold us back and say, it has to be the old way and the new ways of connecting aren't positive, but I think it can be an and I think it's worth saving.
100% agree. Matt, how can an audience member get in touch with you?
Well, I am very approachable, so they can either email me at matt@FSQ Sport, Frank Sierra Queen Sport.com. They can look us up at FSQsport.com. They can follow me on Twitter, Matt Young 101, or LinkedIn. That's where I am. I'm not on Instagram. I'm not on TikTok. I'm way too old for that. So those are the areas. Or they can contact you, and you can supply links.
Fantastic. Matt, thank you for being on the show. I've truly enjoyed this conversation. I knew I would right from the beginning. The conversation we had around building community and how us as a community help each other get to these experiences and ultimately the finish line is so important. And that relationship between your coach and the athlete, and how it's a dynamic across their lifestyle and not just in the vertical of triathlon, for example. Those are truly insightful. So I ask my audience members, please like this show. Please share this with your friends, with your community. Let's get Matt's message out there so we can have a bigger impact and our kids can actually enjoy the sport that they're in, multiple sports for that matter. Matt, again, it's been awesome having you on this show, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you for tuning in to the Chief Endurance Officer podcast. To hear more inspiring stories and strategies around the endurance mindset, be sure to subscribe below or visit us at chiefenduranceofficer.com. Until next time, keep pushing those limits.